Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Strand. My name is Sabir. For a little bit of history, Strand was founded in 1927 by the Bass family over on 4th Avenue's Book Row. Stretching from Union Square to Astor Place, Book Row gradually dwindled until, after over 93 years, Strand is the sole survivor, still run by the Bass family, still housing new and used books, and running near 400 events a year. Tonight, we are... I'll take a bit of applause. Thank you. Tonight, we are celebrating the release of Anne Bogel's new book, Don't Overthink It. A guide... Oh, yeah, let's give her another round of applause. It's a guide to bringing positive thought patterns that will bring more peace, joy, and love into your life. Anne is the author of Reading People and I'd Rather Be Reading, and the creator of the blog Modern Mrs. Darcy, and the podcast What Should I Read Next, and One Great Book. Anne has been featured in O, the Oprah magazine, Real Simple, Bustle, Refinery 29, The Washington Post, and many more. Bogel's popular book lists and reading guides have established her as a tastemaker among readers, authors, and publishers. She lives in Louisville, Kentucky. So without further ado, please join me in welcoming Anne to the Strand.
Thank you, Sabir. And thank you to the Strand for having me. Wow. Writers don't usually get the director's chairs until their books become movies. I don't think they're going to do that with Don't Overthink It. I have come to this bookstore as a reader for many years. It's been referred to as a pilgrimage bookstore. Is anybody here for the first time? All right. Have fun. But it's a pleasure to be here as a writer. So thank you for making that possible by reading and buying your tickets and showing up. I really appreciate it. It's great to see you all. I imagine that it's What Should I Read Next that brought you here tonight. I would love to hear if What Should I Read Next has done good things for anybody's reading life in this room. That is amazing. Thank you. We actually have several What Should I Read Next alums. I don't know if you all know this, but this is what we call our people. They are alumni once they've been on the show. Does anybody want to go to that school? It's a lot of fun. It's a fun crowd. I hope I'm not going to embarrass anybody, but Karen Form is here somewhere. Front row, rolling the dice on your next read. Did you just say it was episode 194? 194, I think. Okay. Rissy Lundberg, math teacher extraordinaire, is here. What's your episode, Rissy? What's your episode number? Do you know? 123. She's episode 123. Now that's a math teacher episode number if ever I heard one. And are you Amy Rohn? Hi. It's nice to see you in the front row. There's a pattern here. What was your episode number? That was recently. 221. 221. Okay. It really is a fun club. So thank you all for coming out. Thank all of you for coming out. That submission form is at whatshouldireadnextpodcast.com/guest. I just want you to know. So the story behind What Should I Read Next actually started on my blog, Modern Mrs. Darcy. I put up a blog post one Sunday morning that said, hey, for years now, after talking about books publicly, people have been coming to me with a question, thinking that I know something about books and reading. And the question is this: I'm looking for my next book. Can you recommend something great for me? And my answer was always, no. I can tell you what I've read and really enjoyed, but I don't know what to tell you that you may enjoy reading next. And I started thinking about this. I'm an introverted INFP, Enneagram 9 slow processor, so I mulled it over for a couple of years in the back of my mind. And then one Sunday morning on an impulse, I put up this blog post, because the thing about blogging is you can put an idea out there and just see what happens. So I put up a post that said, I get this question all the time, and I can't just tell you a great book unless I know something about you. So let's try this. Tell me 3 books you love, 1 book you didn't, and what you're reading now, and I'll recommend 3 titles you may enjoy reading next. That happened a long, long time ago, like 2013, I think. And here we are in 2020, and that is the exact format of the podcast. It didn't start as a podcast. I thought it would be fun to do as a blog series. And what I realized answering these queries week after week was it worked, but I felt like it would work better if we could have a conversation. And at the same time, this podcasting thing was really catching on, and I thought, well, that would be fun, but I wonder what the show could be about. And it took me an embarrassing long time to realize that this book recommendation matchmaking thing happening over here, because that's what I called it originally. I said, let's try some literary matchmaking, personal shopping for books, whatever you want to call it. Like, let's take this idea out for a spin. But I didn't like it in the written format. But I thought talking to readers every week sounded like a lot of fun. And finally, it dawned on me that that was the same idea. If we married the book recommendations with the podcasting format, it could be really rewarding for a lot of people. And thank you for bearing that out. Now, our podcast is really unusual in that after we recorded the first episode in October 2015, anybody who's been listening for a really long time, did anybody listen to the first episode on January 12th, 2016? Has anybody listened to that first episode now with Jamie Golden? Yep. So that was in January 2016. And I know 4 years isn't a long time for some things, but it's a long time for a podcast. And it's a format that has really worked. Also, at the same time, the format is unchanged. And I just told you that I was a slow processor. So every other episode, when a reader tells me 3 books they love, 1 book they don't, and what they're reading now, and then they say, and what should I read next? I think, that's so much pressure. Why are you putting me on the spot? Who came up with this format? So that was back in 2016 when that episode went live. The idea goes back to maybe early 2015. 3 days ago, I had a book come out called Don't Overthink It. And when I started working on this idea, and I started quietly talking about it with a number of writing friends I could count on one hand, they said, wow, that's really different. It's not books and reading. And I said, well, it's these topics I'd love to talk about with my friends. It's topics that I know that I love to explore on my blog, Modern Mrs. Darcy. I know they really resonate with readers. It's something I'm interested in. It's really only in the past month or two that I've realized that What Should I Read Next is a format that couldn't be more perfect for helping readers like myself and readers like you overcome overthinking in their reading life. It's so obvious to me now, but I was completely blind to it at the time. But the format and its inherent limitations, the way it's structured, really helps me, and by extension, you, not overthink it in your reading lives. Does anybody feel like when it's time to choose their next read? Well, when I introduce the episode, I say, what should I read next? Is the podcast that answers the question that plagues every reader. And I really do record that fresh every time. The outro too, it's fresh every time. We get that question a lot. But the question that plagues every reader is, what should I read next? And has anyone ever stood in front of the bookshelves going, I can't be reading until I decide what to read next, but I just don't know. Like, raise your hand if you feel that pain. I mean, I'm always tempted to say we've all been there. I'm just going to say most of us have been there. But the show was designed to answer that question. So I want to tell you why it works. Now, these are questions I address in Don't Overthink It, but tonight we're going to talk specifically about how these principles can work in the reading life. So the first one is that with the format of the show, it lets us limit ourselves to free ourselves. What that means is in our regular lives and in our reading lives, we face so many decisions every day. I mean, we are on one floor of this amazing bookstore, filled of 18 miles of books, which, depending on your mood at any given moment and your mental energy level, will either feel like delightful abundance or horrors. I can't pick one book off this table. How can I pick one book in this entire store? this is a real thing. Like, we all have to make so many decisions every day. And if we want to read for enjoyment or for relaxation or for intellectual stimulation, and we're tired and the thing standing between us and our next read is a decision, then we might just turn on Netflix because they've got this figured out. They're like, if you don't do anything, the next show is popping up right now. Like, they're not going to make you make any decisions. So what Should I Read Next does is it puts really tight limitations in place for the books. The format is unchanged. You tell me 3, 1, and what you're reading now. We call it the 311 in What Should I Read Next HQ, but sometimes people want to tell me like 7 titles they're reading now. I love hearing what readers are reading next, but then too much data makes me feel a little overwhelmed. But you tell me 3 books you love, 1 book you don't, and I tell you 3 titles. Now, who has listened to an episode where I've given a guest more than 3 titles? Do you like that, or do you think, Anne, cut it out? Okay, like it, raise your hand. Anne, cut it out, raise your hand. Oh, you're not helping me here. Come on. The beauty of tight limitations. I know, but see, I can't help myself. But I would never give them 17 because that would be too many for them and for me. They're tight limitations for time. Usually an episode takes about an hour to record, although we have had episodes that have taken like 2.5 hours to record. Usually that's when there are emotional stories, tears involved, or someone who's really nervous, and we talk our way into the point where we're just excited about talking about books. And we'll talk a little more about that. Also, a question I get a lot is how thoroughly do I prepare for every episode? Because the forms that some of you all filled out tonight are very similar to what we have on our guest submission form at whatshouldireadnextpodcast.com. So people ask me, like, how many days do you spend researching? And how long is the gap between when a reader tells me their titles and when I recommend titles back? Like, is it a couple hours? Is it a couple days? Is it a week? Like, there's no gap, you all. I limit myself to 1 hour to prepare for every podcast. Otherwise, I don't know that I could ever stop, because you can never be ready to recommend all the books a person might enjoy. And I just decided 1 hour is enough to have good information to work with. Also, I could prepare all day long and then just be blindsided by the reason that the person loved The Great Gatsby was not at all for the reason that I expected them to, and my preparation would all be in vain. So we like to keep it loose. And there is no gap between when readers tell me their books and when I start suggesting books for them to read. Again, let's go back to who came up with this format idea. Something else that What Should I Read Next does really well is it gives readers an outside perspective on their reading life. If you're the one on the show and you're talking to me about your reading life, you know you have so many data points about what you're reading that you can't always see the patterns that are pretty obvious to an outside observer. You're in your own head, which is wonderful, but also not always an advantage. So I get to be the outside perspective. Now, if you're listening to the show, you get to hear another reader talk about their reading life. And so you can start to see the patterns. You can hear why readers enjoy books, and you get to hear different titles that you might not have picked yourself. So getting that outside perspective is really valuable. Something that the show has that is excellent for overcoming overthinking, whether you're at the grocery store or choosing your next read, is an attitude of experimentation. It is okay to try new things and see what happens next. And we have this attitude of experimentation baked into the show. You don't just tell me 3 books you loved. From the beginning, I knew that negative approach. Well, how about the, let's say, opposite approach? That's a little less judgy. The truth emerges in contrast. So if you read a book and you didn't enjoy it, or you thought, I can see that this is good, but it's not for me, or I don't know, you flung it across the room. Anybody done that? I mean, seriously, raise your hand if you've done that. That is a higher percentage than I would have expected. Okay, you think that readers are placid and then they, throw things, heavy things. But it's baked into the show that if you try something it wasn't for you, that's not a failure. That is excellent information. And you can always use that information, good or bad, to have excellent conversations with your fellow readers. Because even if the reading experience was terrible, I mean, you want to have a good conversation about books, you put some readers around a table and say, tell me about a book that you really didn't like. That's going to be a good conversation. So that attitude of experimentation is part of the show. And finally, the way I close every episode is with a decision, and that is not on accident. I mean, can anybody recite what I would say at the end of the show? So Amy, out of those 3 reads, what title do you think you'll read next? Amy, what did you say?
I said Side.
It was Side.
Since I had a copy on my desk, and I've since then read the whole series.
Okay, so Amy said she would read Side next, and the reason was because she had a copy on her desk. You had to decide somehow, and so you took the sign the universe was giving you, and so she read it, and then she read the whole series. It's not always great. Sometimes we'll check in with readers after a while and say oh, so did you read the book? What did you think? And they'll say, no, not yet. The library came in with a request I've been waiting for a month and a half, so I thought I needed to read that. But they're reading, so we're okay with that. So it's not a coincidence that we have a decision at the end of the episode. And the important thing isn't that they stick to it. We don't send the reading police to knock on your door. Did we? Yeah. If Brenna sends them, she doesn't tell me about it. But we do want readers to have a working plan for what they're going to read next. In the book, I talk about this concept as speeding up to move on. And the idea comes from riding like a motorcycle. I've ridden a motorcycle once in my life because I'm not a wild adventure seeker. I know you're all shocked. But the first time I got on a motorcycle, my friend was hey, we're going to speed up real quick. And I was hey, this is can we not? Can we go slow? And he said, you can't go slow on a motorcycle. It's like learning to ride a bike. You just weave. He's trust me, you'll be happier if you just keep going. It feels uncomfortable at first, but we're gonna speed up. You gotta speed up to move on. And I found that this idea applies so much to our reading life. Well, in any decision we're making, when we're staring at our bookshelves without a book that we're in the middle of, it can feel really uncomfortable as a reader. And sometimes it can feel again, delightful abundance, but sometimes it can feel I'm just not comfortable unless I'm reading a book. So you have to make that decision. You have to speed up to move on so you can be reading again. So we want to hear our guests say what they're going to read next. And I love how sometimes our guests say, well, first they'll say my gut says this, or I love that book, or this one's on my desk. Or sometimes they'll say, I'm going to go to my local indie and see what's on the shelves, or see what they say, or see how quick they can get the first one in. Or sometimes they'll say, I'm going to request them all from the library and I'm going to read whatever comes in next. Or sometimes they say, well, I'm going to go in alphabetical order or publication date. But they'll make up a framework for themselves that lets them decide without deciding. And that totally and completely works. Something I get asked all the time is, am I prone to overthinking after I record an episode? Do I hang up on a call and go, I can't believe I didn't think of that book? Or do I walk into my library and see a book on the shelf and go, that would have been perfect for Rissy? And the answer is yes, I do this all the time. Sometimes I'll finish a recording. This happened fairly recently. I think this episode with Leanne is going live next week. She'll be the first person I've talked to who's legally blind, and we have a really interesting conversation about learning to read and about audiobooks. Well, learning to read on audio and audiobooks that I'm really excited for you all to listen to. But when I read her submission form, I knew immediately, there's a perfect book for her. And I wrote it down on my notes, and then I forgot all about it. And I didn't realize until after I finished recording. So there are 2 things I tell myself here. One, there's lots of books a reader can enjoy reading next. So that's okay. There's always email. I can email her and say, if you want another book recommendation, here you go. We have our Patreon community at patreon.com/whatshouldireadnext. And do you know what people who like the behind the scenes like? They like tales of regret and me screwing up behind the scenes. So I can tell that little story and do a one great book style description of the book I forgot to mention in What Should I Read Next, and then put that out as bonus content. But also, attitude of experimentation. We're all regular people. There are no official reading answers. That's okay, because there's always another episode. And for all of us, there's always another book to read next. So now we're going to put some of those principles into action, and Robin is going to join me to do some literary matchmaking. So thanks for filling out our guest submission form when you all came in. It's really, truly similar, if you've never been to the page, to the submission form our guests fill out at whatshouldireadnextpodcast.com/guest. And that is how we choose most of our guests. If you've applied and we didn't choose you, it was probably a question of timing, or you chose books that I'm on the record of loving fervently and have to make myself not talk about on the podcast anymore. So it's not because we don't think you'd be fascinating to talk to. I think I've gotten maybe 3 forms ever where I thought, we can't make an episode out of that. And it's from a publicist who didn't read the form. So, I mean, you're a reader. You're an expert who could talk brilliantly about this thing you love, that is the reading life, and we would love to talk to you. But also, I can't put out 47 episodes a week because, again, limit yourself to free yourself. Okay, so Robin Smith is an events assistant. Okay, see, usually it's me who sits awkwardly while you all say nice things about me.
Yes.
Welcome to the director's chair.
Great.
So Robin has your dream job. She works at the Strand as an events assistant, and she's a freelance writer on creative nonfiction and news. Her writing has appeared in the Washington Post, Northern Virginia Magazine, which we were just discussing, the Daily News Record, and Brooklyn-based feminist quarterly Bust. And Robin is here to help me with this giant stack of forms that we are not going to get through, but by golly, we are going to have fun doing what we can. All right, hand me the loot.
Okay. All
like,
of them, or just the first one?
Hand me all of them.
Okay, great.
Okay. Or if you want to like feed them to me, we can do like I'm not going to make a Vanna White joke, except I kind of just did.
I could be your Vanna. That would be, I would be honored to do that.
All right. Here's what we have here. I feel like this is a trick, though.
It is a little bit.
Am I being vetted by the Strand? Okay. How many titles do you think I'm holding in my hand? So if there's 5 per form, how many are here? Y'all, this is like
1 million.
This is maybe a few decades of reading in some people's lives. Thank you for contributing. All right, the first
is Sabir, the events director.
Yeah.
My boss.
Wait, who is really getting grilled? Okay, 3 books you love. Okay, so Sabir loves. First of all, I have to say, anyone who listens to the show, or anyone who edits the show, Brenna, I love you. She's going to edit this later. Wait, no, this is a live one. I forgot to give you my disclaimer. Usually what I say is edit it. Massive safety net in place. Not tonight. I screw up. You get to hear it. Welcome to What Should I Read Next Live.
What about me? Can you edit me?
I don't know. Like, is it part of the gig on weird nights like this?
It can be whatever you want it to be.
Come on the podcast on another episode, and Brenna will edit you to your heart's content.
Okay.
So Sabir loves. So what I was saying was I can get long-winded, and I can't do that tonight, or we'll only get to talk about Sabir's books. So Sabir loves Gilead by Marilyn Robinson, Flesh and Blood by Michael Cunningham, and Burnt Shadows by Kamala Shamsi. Ooh, I like it because I like her. But I mean, you're going back. You're digging deep. I respect that. One book you don't, Deutschland by Daryl Pinckney. Okay. Reading lately, Where Reason Ends by Yugunti Flav. What do you think your boss should read next, Robin?
Well, Sabir is usually the one who has recommendations for me, so it's exciting now that the tables have turned. Remember this from my performance review. So I think Sabir could take a break from fiction, even though I know you said you love it a lot, but nonfiction, particularly memoir. I will recommend to you Mindy Kaling's memoir. Either one, just one of them. I think you'd like it. Okay. What do you think?
So he could use some laughter in his life.
Some laughter, yes. Some joy and laughter. It would be good. A good break from. Events are
To mix it up.
Yeah, to mix it up.
To mix it up. It's good to mix things up sometimes. When I walked into the Strand today, for the first time since yesterday, I spotted Silver Sparrow by T.R.E. Jones on that front table, and I thought, oh, that book. And, it doesn't necessarily matter what I like, but I'm looking at Marilyn Robinson, Michael Cunningham, Kamala Shamsi, and I think their storytelling styles are interesting enough to keep it interesting for you, but similar enough to think that those could make a little readerly constellation for you. Okay, do we both get to keep our jobs, or do I need to leave now at the back door? Okay, Jane Pollock is here. She loves the night. Was somebody going to claim that? Do you make a hi? We've got your, we've got like your soul right here on this paper. Jane loves The Night of the Gun by David Carr, Catch and Kill by Ronan Farrow, and She Said by Jodie Cantor and Megan Twohey. She doesn't like Wildflower by Drew Barrymore. Okay, we put One Book You Don't on here. I got to give my disclaimer. It can be difficult to ask people to share a book they don't like, especially in a bookstore that celebrates authors, because we all know a real person wrote that book, even if they died 800 years ago, and we want to respect that. So what we talk about in What Should I Read Next is everybody has their own reading taste. There are books that are well written, and there are books that you deeply resonate with and enjoy the reading experience. I have suffered through books that I am so glad I have read, but that's different than finding the book that you know, like, oh, it's Sunday afternoon and it's raining and I got my cup of something and I want to pick up a book that I am going to enjoy. We're asking for a book that is not that when we ask readers for one book they don't. Okay, so Drew Barrymore, Wildflower, not for her. And lately she's been reading Sally Field in Pieces. Okay, creative nonfiction, memoir lover, what do you think?
I think that you would really enjoy an anthology that Vanity Fair put out last year called Women on Women. It is full of their features from the past couple decades, including like Tina Turner and Tina Fey. All the Tinas are in it. And I think it would be really good, and it would be a good fit with what you put on your sheet. You're welcome.
Diane Keaton also has a beautiful, either new or soon-to-be new memoir hitting shelves about her family of origin. Okay. Elliot Young loves Diary of an 8-Bit Warrior, Diary of a Wimpy Kid, and Harry Potter. He's not sure what's not for him because he loves to read. Elliot, how old are you? 10? Okay. Is this one mine? I got a 10-year-old boy.
You got this.
Or a 10-year-old. I had a 10-year-old girl, too.
I was 10 once.
You could totally do this.
You first, though.
Now, I do not know Diary of an 8-Bit Warrior, but based on your other two picks, I'm going to find it for my 10-year-old and put it on his shelf. I can tell you that he loves, for easy, speedy, laugh out loud reading, Mac Barnett, the Terrible 2 series, and also Mac B. Kid Spy is what he really loves. I gotta warn you though, you can read one of these books in like an hour or two, but you will have fun doing it. So, rainy day when your practice gets canceled or you just had too much homework and you'd rather be reading, that would be a great day for that. Also, I think the Artemis Fowl series could maybe, have you read all the Harry Potter books? And now you're done? You need something else interesting? The Artemis Fowl series could be great for you. And if you do love the first one, there's so many books after that, like what, I know we have some fans in this room, like 7 or 8, so that could keep you busy for a good long time. I think your mom would be really happy if you loved the first book for that reason.
I want to say congratulations because you are way ahead of where I was. I waited until I was 14 to read all the Harry Potter books, and you're already done. So now you have the rest of your life to reread them over and over again.
Is this where I make the joke about not even started till I was 19 and then I could only read one a year? Or does that just make me sound old?
It does not make you sound old.
Okay. Fran loves The Nightingale by Kristen Hanna. I heard a gasp from the front row, like, oh, I love that. Say Nothing by Patrick Kolf. Am I getting that right? Patrick Keefe. And Fried Green Tomatoes at the Whistle Stop Cafe by Fanny Flagg. That book is coming up on the podcast very soon. Recorded that episode, and it's not here. She doesn't like The Book of Joan that was just fervently recommended to a friend. Oh, and an ex-What Should I Read Next alum. Wait, no, we don't call it, you're not an ex-alum, but I just said they recommended a book I didn't like. That totally wasn't a subconscious thing. That was a slip we would edit out, right?
Yes.
Right? Yeah. But What Should I Read Next alum, who will now go unnamed, ardently recommended The Book of Joan. But we don't have the same taste in books, I've learned. We both learned, but we have excellent conversations about books. And lately she's been reading Frederick Douglass and Motherless Brooklyn. She reads most genres, but has never tried YA. What do you think?
I think this one's on you.
I think if you enjoyed The Nightingale by Kristen Hanna, and Fried Green Tomatoes at the Whistle Stop Cafe. Okay. Fran, if you were on the podcast, I would want to really dig into The Book of Joan, which is not like the others. But so I have ideas of why that book wouldn't be for you, but I'd be wondering if I'm right. I am often not right because the title is just a proxy for what could be any number of reasons a book didn't work for a reader. Sometimes it could be timing. Sometimes it could be content. Sometimes it might be like, I never read books about cancer, or at least I don't right now. Sometimes it can be like, I thought that was drivel that shouldn't have been published. Like, that does happen. The Nightingale by Kristen Hanna. You've never tried YA. Are you interested in doing that, Fran? Okay. So there are some books that I find to be crowd pleasers. Not everybody likes them, but an overwhelming number of readers do. If you're interested in trying YA, I would really recommend Julie Buxbaum. If you want to read something of the moment, her book Admission, based on the Aunt Becky college admissions scandal. There's a character clearly based off Aunt Becky in the book. That's coming in May, but right now her 2 books ago book, Tell Me 3 Things, is a great book. That is, I mean, it's a thoroughly YA novel that is thoroughly enjoyed by legions of readers of all ages. That is Tell Me 3 Things. Okay, Daniela and I can have book club together. She loves Persuasion by Jane Austen, Olive Kitteridge, which I only just read for the first time, by Elizabeth Strout, and Me Talk Pretty One Day by David Sedaris. But not for her was The River by Peter Heller. We were admiring the paperback version of that in the bookstore today. I know you have feelings about David Sedaris, Robin. What do you think?
Yes, I do. He was on Whitney Cummings' podcast this week, and they had talked for 2.5 hours, and I listened to all of it. I highly recommend for all of you as well. Anyway, so his most recent book that came out, I believe in 2018, was Calypso. It's his latest essay collection, and it was the first one I had ever read by him, and it was really great. There was another one that made me think of something. I think the combination of Persuasion and Me Talk Pretty One Day would be Wuthering Heights. I read that in January, and I thought it was just absolute smut. It's just so bad. So all the characters are just terrible people. And it's supposed to be a love story, but it's really just narcissism. So I think that's your next move. That would be like the combination of those 2 books. So that's what I recommend. What about you, Anne? Or should we just do another one?
I'm thinking that the readers who love, sometimes I'm really surprised to hear who likes certain books. Like when Jen Hatmaker came on the podcast and said, oh my gosh, David Sedaris is my hero. That's not what I expected her to say. And I loved that so much, so much. And now I want to read Holidays on Ice again.
Yes. I read that one, I think, most recently. And it was interesting. In his later books, there isn't as much of a mix between fiction and essay. But in that one, there's plenty. And so it it was good to have the mix. I liked it.
What I like about David Sedaris is that he starts telling you a story about one thing that on a dime turns to be about something else. So you're laughing and then you're crying, and the shift is like 8 words when you find out what's really happening. And for that, I would really recommend the micro memoirs by Beth Ann Fennelly. There's a collection that came out a couple of years ago called Heating and Cooling, and she has, it's not the same style, but she has this gift of taking you places you didn't think you were going the page before. She captures these important moments in her life. She writes a lot about her family and things she's been through, and illness, and also humor. Like, I remember there's one really funny story about peeing. I don't remember the details, but reading her book, I just think like, oh, keep telling me stories because you are so great at this. That's Heating and Cooling. Okay, Julia loves The Bookish Life of Nina Hill by Abby Waxman, The Friend Zone by Abby Jimenez, and The Things You Save in a Fire by Catherine Center. Not for her, The Ministry of Utmost Happiness by Arundhati Roy. Lately reading Such a Fun Age by Kylie Reed, which was so fun. Okay, what do you think? So lots of romance here. I just want to say that I just finished, like on the airplane, the audio version of her new book, Abby's new book, that is called, there's the Happy Ever After playlist. Where's Julia? Oh, it's so great. Okay, so it's coming in April. I didn't read it in print, but I read The Friend Zone in print, which I feel like readers often ask me, what should I read first, the audio version or the print version? And I think, I don't know, you can't really compare those, because once you've read a book in one format, you can't just go back and read it fresh and really know. But the Happy Ever After playlist was so fun on audio. Put it on your list. It's coming really soon, and I hope you love it. Annie McCloskey, who I got to meet tonight, who I've known on Instagram for forever. Oh, okay, this is going to be our last one. Loves Rebecca, The Cider House Rules, and 11/22/63. Not for her, Eat, Pray, Love. And lately she's been reading and loving The Bean Trees. So I'm thinking, if you haven't yet, and I hope you have, Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie, definitely Americana. So great with the big themes you've pulled out here. Not that there's like time travel in it, but big, juicy stories, which is what I see in your favorites. And I think anyone.
Sorry.
Oh, sorry. Are you like, why are you looking? Yeah.
I love Americana.
Oh, I'm so glad to hear it. Read everything she's written. It will make you happy. Well, I suspect. And if it doesn't, we could have a great conversation on what should I read next about it. Okay.
And then what I'll quickly add to that is White Teeth by Zadie Smith.
But have you read it?
You will now. You will read it now. Yeah.
I think the universe is suggesting what you should read next. Okay, that is a little flavor of what it looks like for the podcast. That's like, so we were just talking about micro memoirs where Beth Ann Fennelly compresses these, what are usually long narratives, into a page or two. Mm-hmm. This is like the Heating and Cooling version of the podcast.
I'm really glad that we could do this.
I'm glad we could do this.
Yeah,
okay, please thank Robin for joining me in the literary matchmaking madness.
Thank you, and please stand and thank Anne. You don't have to stand if you don't want to. But
I was like, is this how they do it at the Strand?
I just thought a standing ovation would be appropriate. Yeah, thank you.
Oh, thank you all. Thank you. Now we get to do questions.
Yes.
How do you do this?
Well, I will go around with the
Sabir's
microphone.
in charge. I like it.
I was just going to say, if you want to raise your hand, we'll run a mic to you.
Mm-hmm. And then I can take over the side.
Okay. Thank you.
What is the book that you are so excited to introduce your children to?
That, is not where I thought that conversation was going. I was like visualizing my bookshelves and what's coming this summer. So excited to introduce my children to. Okay, so the assumption behind this is there are books I'm excited to introduce my children to. But I talk to people about books and reading for a job, and it seems there's a pattern. If there's a book you can't wait to introduce your children to because it's so deeply meaningful to you, then you are asking the universe to make your children hate it. So first of all, I'm not going to put an answer out there. I will say that there are books that I remember really enjoying, that I've watched them read and not enjoyed, and then I thought, I'm raising humans who can't think, and then I read the book again and go, oh, it's a different experience when you're 9 and when you're 40. Who knew? But I will say that my daughters come to me every year and say, do you think I'm old enough to read Jane Austen yet? And I only recently, my oldest is 14, I said, actually, by now, maybe. But it wouldn't hurt to wait. Because I feel like if you read beloved books that are not for 9-year-olds before their time, then they're just going to be inoculated against books that you loved instead of actually see the value of them. So how's that for a non-answer? Yeah. But seriously, over and over again, you ask your child to love your favorite book. I mean, even if it's only with your eyes or with your hints, putting it on their nightstand, and they'll be like, yeah, I'll show you.
Anne, can you share where you got your necklace from? Because I love it.
Thank you. This 3-strand cheap pearls, I mean, they're totally imitation pearls, is from a shop I do not know the name of, a couple doors down from Main Street Books in Davidson, North Carolina, that I got on book tour for. I went there for I'd Rather Be Reading and What Should I Read Next. But I just made a stop through Davidson back in the fall because I was in North Carolina, and it was only 45 minutes out of the way, and am I the only person in the room who goes miles and minutes out of her way to see a great bookstore? I mean, anybody done that? Yeah, I'm not alone. That shop was still there then. Yeah, it was $18, which means it's not quality, but I'm glad it looks good from back there. Thank you.
Hi, Anne.
Hi.
How do you go about selecting books for your summer reading guide?
Oh, okay. That is a project that is so easy to overthink. I am reading Publishers Weekly and talking to readers and getting publicist submissions, and basically I read a whole lot of books. That was me deciding not to gently swear on the podcast, because Brenna's not here to edit it out. I read a whole lot of books, and but I'm choosing them purposefully. I know that I just realized that I didn't have any books by men on the list about a month ago. So I went to find some books by men. And I realized that I was really heavy in the mystery genre this year. And I was like, oh, well, either we need to make this a thing or we need to balance it out. But I'm reading. And I fluctuate wildly between thinking I want to read every book published in the land between March 1st and the 4th of July so I can talk about them all and choose the best, and thinking readers do not want a 75-book summer reading guide. That's not helpful. That's too many. I see you shaking your heads no, we really don't. It's so true. Lots of reading. That's the answer. There's some good ones coming too. I'm really excited.
Oh, hi. Hi. I was just curious to follow up on the reading and the lots of reading and putting together a guide. At what point reading a book are you inclined to give up on it, if you will? Because you're going to do all this reading and create a summer reading list or do whatever. There are probably certain books, at least in my... There's some books here and there where about page 80 or page 120, I'm kind of I don't think this really has it, and I'll just stop. Not too many, but I was just curious, what was your process with that? Because that would let you read more things and choose from a wider variety of things rather than...
Yeah. So this can be a really inflammatory question for a lot of readers who have very strong opinions about whether it's okay to not finish that book you start. It depends. I often am reading for a certain purpose. If I'm reading titles for the summer reading guide and I start reading a book and I realize that, I don't know, everybody's dying and there's tons of triggers on the first 5 pages that it's just going to automatically mean it's not a book that's for a lot of readers. When I'm looking for titles for the summer reading guide, guide, I'm definitely looking for things that are not, that don't have niche appeal. I'm looking for readers or books that will apply to a wide variety of readers. So right then I can be like, I'm on page 5 and I can see this isn't working. But last year I gave up a book, I think on like page 300 of a 420 page book that had been highly recommended by someone that I love to talk books with. And I kept thinking, it's gonna get better. It's gonna get better. It's gonna get better. And she finally told me, wait, you're on page 320? And it's not, like, it's not, no, you can just move on. So it's very circumstantial. But I am, it's a spirit of experimentation. I am definitely an abandoner. Or sometimes I'll start reading a book, and I went through this really weird kick a few years back where I kept picking up plane crash books on airplanes without knowing it. And I thought, you have got to be kidding me. So that isn't like never, but definitely wrong book, wrong time.
How many books do you read a week? Are you a speed reader? And what tips can you recommend for reading more?
I read 3 to 4 books a week typically, although I do have 2 great weeks a year, Beach Week and the week between Christmas and New Year's, where I'll read like a book a day. It's great, especially at the beginning of the year. I think like, I'm going to read like 900 books this year, which I don't think is a good idea, actually. But that's not real life. That's holiday life or beach life. I don't do the speed reading, like the tips for like how to become a speed reader and quadruple your reading speed. I don't do that. I am a naturally fast reader. I have really big feet and I'm a slow runner and my eyes are blue. And the research indicates that reading speed, like you can nudge it a little bit in one direction or another, but if you're a slow reader or a fast reader, that's just kind of like what you got in the lottery. So I don't want to, like, oh, yay me. Like I'm a really slow runner and the universe is maybe balancing out. And tips for reading faster. I do know that when you're helping a child develop reading fluency, what you can do is what's recommended by people smarter than me about such things, because I am not a teacher, is you give them a book a little bit below their grade level so that they can see they don't have to struggle to comprehend, they're learning to scan quickly. And I've talked to some adults who say that has worked for them. Like they wouldn't try to read quickly something like Pride and Prejudice with its early, 200 years old, interesting language. But they could do that with like a contemporary romance, which is just written in a more, it's written the way that we talk. And so you can read that faster than your brain can process something that was originally written in Italian in the 16th century. Can anybody name a book for that? There should be like a door prize.
And we have time for just one more question.
Yeah. She go. Are you sure? Yeah, that's fine. Okay.
Maybe I can talk really fast.
Okay, I'll talk really fast too.
No.
You have to read a lot for work, so this is your job. So do you ever feel that you can't read enough of books that you want to read for your personal reading life because you're compelled to read the books that you're supposed to for your job?
There have been times where I realized that this could be a problem. Like, if I'm not enjoying it and I don't want to talk about books, it's not going to be fun to listen to the podcast. And that would be a real downer. I have a lot of control over the show and over my blog and over the summer reading guide. And if it was not good for my reading life, then we would just not have a summer reading guide, which we actually really discussed a lot last year. We're having a summer reading guide. But I'm definitely aware that if I'm for summer reading guide season, I can't read all contemporary novels for 4 months straight because that makes me an unhappy reader. So I am definitely aware, I pay attention to the mix of titles I'm reading and genre, and this time of year, really publication date and authorship and nationality and all that. Or it does, it loses its spice. You got to mix it up. It's like a recurring theme tonight.
Hi, so I know we in here all love to read, but I was wondering if you had any advice for people who say that they don't like to read or more reluctant readers.
Is there someone specific you have in mind?
I teach high school English.
Oh! Yes, if they could. So with a lot of reluctant readers, I don't know how I feel about this, but I get a lot of questions at book tour events from women specifically asking about husbands, and people talking about reluctant children of theirs. I love that you're asking for your students. I think the key is finding a way in. And that's not going to be the same book for everybody. Like, if only it were that easy, but also what would the fun in that be? But sometimes it's the topic, or sometimes it's the story that really grabs them, or the backstory of the author, but if you can find which of course, this is hard, like that's what we're talking about tonight, but if you can find the right book that a struggling reader really connects with, a lot of people who are not enthusiastic about reading, especially when they're young, is that they just haven't had the experience of enjoying a book. They read because they have to or because they should, and they don't understand what all the fuss is about because they've never had that experience that keeps us coming back. But if someone can put a book in their hands that is right for them, they can go, oh, now I get it, and they'll want to do it again. Yeah. Thank you all. Those are great questions.